What's going on, guys? Thanks for tuning in to Brothers of Merit. Taylor,
What up?
this episode was, as you would say,
Fire.
Bow, bow, bow. Yeah. I can't. The
Fire.
music references. It
Seriously.
was amazing. So we interviewed MJ Salvatore.
All the flames.
We
Heck yeah.
met him through Steve Glick, who was actually on our first season with Men of Iron. So definitely check them out, Manheim, Pennsylvania. Men of Iron, their ministry. But we met MJ
Men of
through
Iron
Steve.
podcast. Yeah.
Yep, and the Men of Iron podcast. And we met MJ through Steve, and it just, life, and we finally got a chance to get him on here.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad we did. Like, MJ's story and his vulnerability right from the start. Like, he came out of the gates just like,
Yeah.
this is what went on in my life. And Taylor and I were sitting here like, dude, so many men can relate to what he was saying. And that's what I love about our podcast. And I'm not being like conceited or I love what we do because this is what men need to hear. This is what so many men that are listening probably go through and are thinking in their heads and have gone through. And this is what they need to hear. This is it. And MJ was just like super humble, vulnerable, and just really went into like detail about his life. And then that went into so many different directions of what we talked about. It was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, like, this is like your warning. Like, if you're driving, listen to this, and you're going to want to listen again.
Yep.
If you're not, and you're like at your desk or at work, like, pause us right now. Go get like a notebook and a pen, and because you're going to want to write down every single one of the nuggets that he has here. I can't even begin to tell you all the ones that there is. But there was, there's literally like there was tons of moments when I was just sitting here like Brandon was looking at me like, "Do you have a question?" And I was like, I don't have a question. Like, we're just here to chat and do. Like, I don't have. Yeah. I'm just like floored right now about what's going on. Like this. I mean, it was awesome. Literally, this is. I mean, far and away one of my favorites that we've ever done.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Like the content he provided. I'm looking at you like, you got one or do I got one? Because I just loved listening to him talk.
Yeah,
like
it was probably one of the most conversational ones we've ever had. Like, this is just it. Like, we always say, like, if it fires us up, it's a good one. And I left freaking
super
up.
Fired. I won't start singing again, but super fired up. And I mean, so the name of the episode is "Surrender Leads to Healing," and we get into that in much more detail in the actual episode. But just if you guys can sit there and think about the title, how like surrender leads to healing, it's just giving yourself to God, just surrendering yourself over. And that's what leads to the healing. We talked about brokenness, how it brings us together, and redemption leads us, it keeps us together. It's just, there's so many good things that are coming out that are like coming off the top of my head now of his episode. They're just amazing.
Right. Well, I mean, and he he is about to, like, he'll tell you his story. And like he said from the jump, like, it's literally maybe 1 minute into him talking, he starts to bring all this stuff up. But he talks about like past hurts from his father and, like the pain and stuff that he's dealt with in his life, and I think that's super relatable, right? Like we've talked definitely about, like John Eldridge and Wild at Heart, like issues with your father is like a huge part of that book. Like there's a reason why that's the number one, like the Bible of manhood, essentially. Like there's a reason why. It's because it's relatable. So like if you're listening to this, like the odds are good you're gonna relate specifically to that example. But even if you don't, like I guess that's why I'm even bringing this up. Like, even if you don't relate to that specific example, surrender leads to healing, meaning like every single person in their life has a reason to like need healing from something, right? Like everyone has
absolutely.
Like, I feel like me and Amber talk about this, like when we watch shows like, if you watch The Voice, America's Got Talent, Masked Singer nowadays, I've never even seen that, but just trying to be relevant. Like I'm sure they do that. Like like every single one of them, they'll tell like some sob story of like how this whatever. Like this person is great at singing, but like, oh my gosh, they lost their father, or their mom has cancer or whatever. Like, and I'm not at all making light of that. I'm saying like sometimes when you get to the judging, it's like, oh, here's the sob story. And like me and Amber have talked about this lots of times. Like, again, not joking about it. It's because like it's not like, oh, like where do they find these people with these stories? Like, it's because every single one of us has a story. Right? Like every single one of us, if you just talk about your past, like, has something in your life that could tug on people's heartstrings, right?
Yep.
Because this life brings, like, those things. There's sin in the world.
Yeah.
Take heart, Christ has overcome the world. Like, we don't have to live in that. Like, we didn't even get into that episode. Like, this is just us, like, rapping about it right now. But
right.
I don't know. Like, so I guess that's my point. Like, every single person, like, everything you're about to hear, this you're gonna relate
it's
to.
Relatable.
You're gonna relate to some part of this. We haven't said this in a while, but like, this is how you support Brothers in Merit is if you're listening to this and you're relating to this and you're ready to, and you hear something that fires you up, and I guarantee you, if you have a pulse, like, it's going to, like, go share it with somebody else. And this is an easy one to be like, hey, like, this really inspired me. This was super, hit me where I needed it and encouraged me. I just wanted to encourage you too. Send this to a friend. Reach out to them and bless somebody else by what God has to say through the next 30 minutes. And share that with a buddy. Or even if you don't have anyone specific in mind, share it on your own social media. Like, that's what it's for. Yep. Social media. Let's use it to a good, in a good way. But yeah, I mean, that's how you support us, by encouraging other people. That's all we're here for.
And I hit on that in the episode. That's exactly it. Like, what support is not always about hitting the 5 stars and liking this and following us. And obviously that's one way to show it. But the main reason we started this podcast and we do it is exactly for that. Is you can support us by just following, being with God and being in brotherhood. Like, that's that's the support. We just, and
if you don't, I mean, it's like, we've said this about a couple other episodes. Like, if you don't leave the next 30 minutes, and I promise we'll get there.
Yeah.
We're just like leaving you, like, you just smash the 30-second button. If you don't leave the next 30 minutes, like, golly, I need people in my life. Like, then I don't know what it's going to take. Like, because this is like, it's awesome. It's really good.
And this is our weekly reminder, as you said in there. It's good to get the weekly reminder of why we need brotherhood, and this is a good weekly reminder. So, guys, let's transition tune into it, and see you on the other side.
All right.
All right, MJ, how you doing tonight, sir?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Thanks for coming on to the show. We were actually connected with you through Steve Glick. If you guys, I'm sure, have listened to it. If not, he's with Men of Iron up there in Mannheim. And if you could, just to get right into it, tell us a little bit about your your bring up and your testimony, and maybe how you and Steve met and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on the show. So appreciate you guys and everything that you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm currently 31 years old, and recently started my journey back with the Lord about 10 years ago.
Awesome.
I grew up in a Christian home, and the Lord was always centered. I remember always praying at dinner, and I went to a private Christian school, the Christian college, but never really made the relationship my own until I was about 22. After a lot of just severe brokenness and a lot of betrayal from my father, it just kind of led me into a downward spiral, and I was left in a deep valley. And just felt the Lord kind of speak to me in that moment. The Holy Spirit was stirring, and just kind of made the decision, Lord, this time it's going to be about you and I. And I said, do whatever needs to be done. And I looked at the effects of that prayer 9 years later. And the Lord's done some amazing things, just refined my heart, and just found a passion and an intimacy with him that I've never experienced before, that I'd always wanted. Came around a great group of people, wonderful church that I'm currently been plugged into for the last 4 years. And I connected with Steve Glick even about, a year ago. He had reached out on Instagram, and love the power of social media for that reason.
Oh, yeah.
And he had wanted me to be a guest on the Men of Iron podcast, and I've been following them and everything they do for a while. And I actually grew up, went to college down in Pennsylvania, which was awesome. So there was already a tie in there. And Steve and I connected and been bros ever since.
I love it. That's awesome.
And you said down in Pennsylvania. Where are you from, and like where are you at now? And
Yeah. So currently reside in Connecticut. And I was born and raised in Connecticut and was only down in Pennsylvania for 4.5 years when I was doing my undergrad.
okay, cool. Where'd you go?
Eastern University, right in St.
Heck
David's,
yeah.
Wayne area.
Yeah, I have a couple. One of my best friends went to Eastern. That's awesome.
Oh, see? Go Eagles. Come on.
There you go. I love it. Dude, that's awesome. I love even just like your intro there, like just to be flat out, like the vulnerability of like your intro there is, I think, super, super relatable. And so I love that. Thank you for just like opening it up with that willingness. So I'm pumped about what God has in store for the next 15, 20 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Me
So
too.
MJ, on that, you mentioned in there about you had issues with your father. So I think that's relatable to a lot of the guys that listen to our show. So with that being said, how did you connect with God in order to get through that? Or how did he show up in your life to walk you through it and to give you that strength and courage to keep going when the number one man in your life, or supposed to be, is the one you're having issues with?
Oh, that's a great question. I love that question. So for me, my dad was always present, but work was always put before anything else. And him and my parents were unequally yoked for years. And he actually had multiple affairs, which kind of led me into my downward spiral. My parents have since gotten divorced. And for a long time, I couldn't separate the feelings that I had of my earthly father from my heavenly father. And there was a constant push and pull of, that God is going to abandon me. God is going to completely betray me. And it wasn't until I decided to make that relationship real on my own, like I had said a little while ago, when I was in my early 20s, the Lord little by slowly started to dissect just pieces of my heart, kind of like layers of an onion. And I was forced to really confront the hurt and bring it to the foot of the cross, which I had never really done at that point. You're talking at that point in time, 21 years worth of hurt and bitterness and unforgiveness and just anger, just kind of pent up. And then it all kind of spilled out when I found out about the affairs, and just grew up with a lot of emotional abuse from him and verbal abuse on top of it. So I never felt good enough, and I felt like God was just not proud of me and like didn't love me, all that stuff. So super, super like tough, but little by slowly, the Lord started to position people strategically in my path that just helped me navigate those next steps of where God was, unbeknownst to me, preparing me and taking me. And for me, one of the biggest things in my faith journey up to this point is the fact that surrender provides healing. I will say that, and I will hold to that till the day that I die.
That's a good word.
So, surrender leads to healing, and it's not until we posture ourselves in humility to say, God, I cannot do this on my own, that we create space for him to just intercede, and then he really does something that I don't think we expect. And I didn't even realize how much I was actually healing in the process until I kind of came out of the process and kind of looked back at it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, and I got to say, just like Taylor said a few minutes ago, the vulnerability, because as I said, so many men, I think, have issues with their fathers, and a lot of them are steering from some of the same exact issues that you just mentioned. So to hear how you have dealt with it and how you have seeked God in order to deal with that is exactly why men tune into our show and what they need to hear. So what you also just said is you had others show up in your life during that helped steer you in the right direction. How did that look? Was it other men, like brotherhood? Was it any females? Like, how did that go?
Yeah, no. So I want to say, for me, someone actually asked me this conversation last Sunday. They asked me this question last Sunday. We were having a conversation at brunch, and I had a couple 22-year-olds say, what advice would you give yourself 10 years ago that we should take into account now? And I said, be very strategic and unapologetic about who you choose to surround yourself with. And for me, I was with all the wrong people for late college, early 20s, and I didn't find my tribe of people probably until the back end of my 20s. And my life probably would have looked a little different had I found them sooner, but God had the plan in motion for my story. And the people, just divine appointments. Some were older men who just came alongside me just to meet once a month and kind of walked with me through a lot of the hurt and unforgiveness that I was experiencing with my dad, which led to a sit down with my dad a few years ago and just able to express all my hurt. And like, we're in the process of trying to figure out what does a father-son relationship look like now. We're still navigating that. But people strategically positioned in my path that fueled me to look for the people who didn't have what I had. So I kind of just kept my eyes open for those people at church, you know, the new person that would come in, not introduce themselves, and you kind of try to see them sneak out the back door. You kind of grab those people just to let them know that they're seen and they're valued. And the Lord opened up so many doors through connections just like that. I think it's just an intentionality piece. And I think that's what a lot of men in our generation are sometimes afraid to do. They're afraid to be 100%. Intentional. They're afraid to put their hearts out there. And, you know, for me, I'm an open book. Like, what you see is what you get. Like, you want to know, like, I'll share. Like, and this is why we're here right now, you know. And for me, all it took was seeing people who were just as broken as I was. But hey, like, I see something in you that you don't see in yourself yet. I want to help you get to where you can go. And we're going to come alongside one another, and we're going to go shoulder to shoulder, and we're going to do it together. And that completely changed the way that my entire walk has gone the last 2 years.
Oh, I bet. And vice versa on that standpoint as well, is you see things that they don't see in themselves, and it's a two-way street. They then help you and see things in you that you don't see in yourself. And that's the benefit of brotherhood. That's why we do this podcast, and that's why we have this ministry, is to show people that it helps. Like, this works if you can find another men and figure out how to go about life following and going with God and other brothers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know, it's, for me, it's really interesting because I've reflected a lot. You know, we're kind of getting toward the end of the year. So a lot of us tend to kind of like play back a lot of stuff that's gone down. You know, and over the last year specifically, 2019 was really about intention being met with no hidden agenda. And I think that is like the crucial piece for authentic friendship, when you have intention met with no hidden agenda, because you're literally like, I see this in you. Like, hey, like, there is greatness inside of you. Like, let's just figure it out together. And I've sat with some of my guys this year in some of the most painful moments of their lives. They in turn have sat with me in like a major wilderness season that I was in earlier this year. And we've carried one another's burdens. And I've never felt more covered by God because of the brothers that he's put me in place with in those worst moments, because that's when it gets real. When you're in the thick and you're in the dirt and you're in the grime and you're in the thick of that fight, knowing that you have other people standing with you, that, you know, there's times we can't get up on our own. We need someone, you know, to say like, hey, you can do this, or like, take it a step further. Like, we need the old like football player approach, like, smack your butt, like, get back out on the field, go. Like, we're not done. We're not throwing in the towel, you know? So just to be able to have that mindset of intention not met with a hidden agenda, all of my guys, myself included, has kind of adopted that as part of our heartbeat. And it's really just facilitated how like our circle has expanded and how other people have come into the fold, because they see something that's authentic and genuine, and they want to be a part of it because it's tangible and it's real. The circle is a tight circle, but it's an open circle.
That's awesome. I love that. That's I've heard I actually heard from a guy at my parents' church. He came and spoke one time about like brotherhood, and he had just lost his wife, and he's probably about as old as we are now, maybe a little older. So younger, lost his wife to cancer, and it was just a heartbreaking thing. And he talked about how brotherhood got him through that, and he described that as there were moments when he was like just in the pit of like everything you're just talking about, like that wilderness, like just down in the muck and the dirt. And he was like, what got him through was the fact that there was brothers that knew when it was time to just crawl down there with him and just lay in the pit with him. And then there were also time when it was like, all right, I know you can't do this on your own, but I'm gonna now it's time for me to pick you up out of it. Like, you need guys that are gonna be willing to do both.
Exactly.
Because sometimes it's very like that football guy, like you said, that rah-rah. Like sometimes it's easy for us to like act like we're trying to help, but we're really just, like, oh, whatever, get over it, man. Like, and sometimes you need that guy to just be like, dude, this sucks, and I'm here to hurt with you. And like, and those moments are some of the richest that you can go through.
And it's funny on this topic. So MJ, we'll share your Instagram on this episode so everyone can see it. But and obviously you know this because it's in your bio. But everything we're talking about right now in your bio, it says brokenness brings us together. So I feel like that is a perfect like sum up of every single thing we're talking about. That the brokenness, the pain, and the agony, and the things you go through in everyday life, and loss of wives and children, and just the struggle in life in general. Sure. That by seeking God and seeking brothers, that brings us together as one to get us through it. So you were saying that, and I was like, wait a minute, I know I've seen that somewhere. And,
it was on
his bio.
That's it, man. And like that word, I actually I heard that word from the Lord in my wilderness season when I was kind of right dead center in the middle of it. And the first time I felt like the Lord started to speak after everything was so quiet. And I've taken that, like, brokenness brings us together, redemption keeps us close, because we get to remember. Because if we don't remember, we almost do a disservice to God, because we're not expressing the gratitude of thanks that he got us through it. And it's so easy once we're out of it to be like, oh, things are great, like everything's Gucci, I'm fine, like we're good, like, and like a lot of times that's not the case, like there will be another wilderness season. There will be another test. There will be another trial. We know that, but we get to remember where we've all come from.
Right.
And I think that's also something that's been so beneficial to my church tribe and my community.
Yeah.
Because we have people that are coming into the fold now, and my church has 7 different locations, but our campus specifically, there's a heartbeat of about 20 people that have been there for years, and we've been in the thick of it to each other, and everyone coming in always assumes that it's been this way.
Right.
When in all reality, we get to remember what it was like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
We know what burdens we've carried. So it allows us to just kind of like walk in that freedom instead of having to strive for it. But then we also get to remember where we've come from. So it's like, hey, like you may have been here a couple years ago. This is not where you are today. And we get to give each other those reminders, and we get to put each other back to the truths in Scripture and just press each other on. That's what it's about.
Heck yeah. I love it. I'm glad that you actually just said that point, because that was going to be part of like what my next question is. Because we're literally like sitting here like motioning to each other like, this is awesome. But so I guess kind of, it's almost like, I guess I'm going to ask kind of the same question that you said that guy asked you this past weekend. But like, I love that we're getting to have this conversation with you now, 10 years into the journey. And so kind of, like I said, it's kind of similar to that question that was asked you this weekend of what advice would you give to yourself 10 years ago? But I'm going to kind of like take your answer and ask a question off of that. So like you said that you would be intentional about the people that you surround yourself with, but like, what would be your advice for someone who's listening and is like, okay, like that's great, I need to be intentional about the people that I'm with. But like one of the things I think that makes Brothers of Merit and the weekly podcast that we're doing so like beneficial is just the weekly reminder of like if you're coming in, you're sitting there, you're in your car right now and you're listening, like, but like, how do I do that? How do I find people that are going to be, how can I find people that are going to get me to a place that 10 years from now I'm going to look like MJ does right now? You know what I
Oh
mean?
boy.
Like, what kind
Wow.
of advice do you have for someone who's looking for that tribe to help them get to where you are?
That's a good one.
Does that make any sense?
That makes total sense. I love these questions. These are fantastic. You know, I think for anyone who's listening to this, it really just starts with a risk. Like any type of vulnerability is
Yeah.
a risk. And there could be people listening who may be dead center in the battle of a porn addiction. That is even something that God has brought me out of after a 15-year battle, like, and all it takes in moments is like, hey, like, this is a problem. I can't carry this on my own. I need accountability. Like, I need someone to just come alongside me. And a lot of times we connect through the weaknesses. That's what it is. So
Yeah.
I think just it's a risk to just say, I need help. And don't be afraid of that. Don't feel like we have to puff up our chests as men. Be like, oh no, I have it all together. I'm fine. Like, I'm fine is literally code for help.
Yep. I'm not fine. I'm not fine.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think like the advice that I would give is like, don't be afraid to reach out to someone, even if you have one person. Sometimes all it takes is one person who's willing to sit down, who's willing to just listen.
Yep.
And we're so connected digitally because of our generation today. And that's all well and good. But the real heart of helping someone and like having that tribe, you need substance, you need face-to-face interaction, you need to just come alongside your brother or sister with your hand around them, like pray over them. Even if it's something that you may not have personally struggled with, I think it's just making yourself available. And
Yep.
of course, there's a time and a place for all of those things, but I think just be that presence for somebody and know that our journeys and what we've gone through could sometimes be the setup for somebody else getting to where they need to go.
I love it. That's awesome. So I have one more question here before Brandon asks the wrap-up question.
Okay.
So earlier you said surrender leads to healing. And I just want to kind of like dive back into that just real quick.
Sure.
And specifically in the world of like forgiveness that you were talking about and everything with your dad. Because like we said, I mean, John Eldridge, Wild at Heart, like all that stuff, it like father issues and unforgiveness and things that all come through that like is a big issue. Obviously, guys deal with that. I know that hits very, very close to home with me, everything your story had. So with what you're saying, like surrender leads to healing. Can you just like dissect that a little bit more in the world of forgiveness and like what's the power of that statement, I guess,
Sure.
for you?
For me, it's just, again, like when you say, like when I think of surrender, I think of how I want to posture my heart towards Christ, right? So for us, that could literally just be like intentional quiet time or like time in prayer, or you're with your brothers, etc. But that surrender aspect, when we posture ourselves for surrender, which leads to healing, if you guys look right now and you put your hands out in front of you, this is like how I want to live my life. This is like the best analogy I can give. If you look and you have your hands out in front of you and you close your fists and you clench them so tight and they're clenched, you're tensed up, right? You're like you're all the forces in the hands to keep them closed, right? Surrender, which leads to healing, for me is literally allowing God to open our palms to receive that healing. So it's setting our hearts in a posture of open palms to just trust that the same God who brought me through what he's brought me through, whatever it may be, whatever you've been through, whatever I've been through, whatever any of us have been through, it's a choice to say, I know this may not make sense, but I know that your word holds true. I know that you are the God that you say that you are. And that's hard. That's hard to say. And sometimes we don't feel it, but sometimes just to speak it out into existence leaves room for heaven to do something, even if we're not feeling it. So like sit with open palms and allow the Spirit to just flood in and then the healing takes place. And a lot of times I laugh because I had no idea how much healing was taking place in the process.
Right.
And there's times when I think we all could say we've been wrung out like a sponge.
Sure.
We've been tested, we've been beaten down.
Oh yeah.
Yet we're here, we're still standing. God is still God. And sometimes we have to get refined, because without the refining, sometimes we don't learn the heartbeat of Jesus without the refining.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Dude, it's spot on. And so how we typically, and I'm sure you know it because you listen to our show, but as we end it, as always, your advice on brotherhood. So I know we talked on about like your advice on finding the brothers that you're trying to seek that guidance from and get into community with. But once you do find them, what is your advice, MJ's advice, on just being in brotherhood, and how does that look? How do you do it, and how do you make it last?
The best example I could use, and when my dude listens to this podcast, he's gonna be so mad that I'm calling him out. But my buddy, my best friend Tim, call him T. So, T was actually one of the first people that I was able to kind of put my leadership into practice with, and everything that I had studied in like a real intentional discipleship. And we're only a year apart, but just very different stages in the journey, but a common heartbeat to want to just grow closer to God, period. And so for me, what does it look like? Daily check-ins on how's your heart, asking the hard questions. What did you struggle with this week? Sometimes just calling each other on a lunch break just to pray. These are all things that we have done and that we do consistently to kind of just keep that fire for God alive. And then maybe it's reading through different chapters in the Bible together, sharing our insights on different things. And for me, to see him specifically just kind of skyrocket in his growth and just actually like pour back into me when I poured into him, like for the first little bit of the friendship, like that's where you know that like something has shifted and hearts have been changed. Just kind of that reminder of truth. It's an investment, and it's a willingness to say like, yeah, like we're in the thick of it. And for me personally, if you're my friend, you're my friend. It doesn't mean we're not going to butt heads. It does not mean that we're not going to disagree. But at the end of the day, like, I love you, like I am for you, and like we will navigate this together. It's just it's a contending to say that I'm with you and I'm not going anywhere and I'm not giving up on you. And guys need that. They need someone. We all need people just who are present and who are just there and who are consistent. And I feel like that consistency and that mutual willingness, at least for like my buddy Tim and I, to just like, hey, like, yeah, sometimes things do suck, but sometimes God is like doing some really big things, and then we get to celebrate that with each other. But you better believe like that dude was the one in my wilderness season when I was down and out, who literally was like, no, I'm going to pray over you. We're going to get through this. And it's just almost unspoken. It's like an unspoken loyalty.
That's a good word.
That's really good word.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
And I love Taylor has always said since I've met him that in brotherhood, it's saying the things that need to be heard, but not necessarily want to be said. You know what I mean? So you need to hear this. You don't want me to say it, but you need to hear it to make us better, to make you better, to make your walk better, and to make your Jesus image better. So everything you were saying just summed up like Taylor and I's friendship, basically, because he is definitely the check-in partner that I have, that when I have something, I bounce it off of him, and vice versa. So
love that.
MJ, dude, I'm telling you what, man, we have loved this conversation. Like it was, as Taylor would say, it was fire.
I love it. This was amazing.
I'm picturing the fire emoji right now, because Taylor is infamous for, if he loves something, it's like 17 of those things, like fire, 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 fire.
So good.
But dude, seriously, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for listening to us and just supporting it, and you're not supporting it by like giving us likes and supporting it by like shouting us out and commenting, but supporting it by being in brotherhood and walking with God. Like that's how you support us, and that's all we ask for anybody out there is just to do that, to make the kingdom better for men, which then makes it better for women, for children, and for the rest of the world. So
come on. That's it. Love it.
Dude, so MJ, thanks, yeah, seriously, we appreciate it.
This was awesome.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. All right, guys, there you have it. Thanks for tuning in to the episode with MJ. As I told you, and Taylor told you from the jump, that episode was awesome. It still has us fired up. I'm going to go listen to it again, even after I edit it, and put things together. Like, that'll be a third time listening to it. And there's so much to take away from it. So we really hope you guys enjoyed it. MJ, when you're listening to this, thanks again, dude, for coming on to the show. Thanks for your support, and thanks for supporting brotherhood. And all of you guys that are listening to this, thanks. Like, we're saying thank you, not just for the support of what you do and follows and comments, but thanks for just being in brotherhood together through Christ. Like, that's what our mission is. Yep. That's how you support us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like we said, I'm fired up right now. I know I'm going to listen to this one a couple times. I'm going to share this with people that I know. Like, there's people that I'm thinking of already that I know I'm going to share this with.
While he was interviewing, I was thinking it, like,
right.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, encourage you to do the same. There's nothing else really to say.
Nope. So you guys heard it all.
Fired me up.
Yep. So next week we have Zach Maldonado for the second time for all of our Brothers of Merit regulars. You guys know we had him in season 1. So he is since season 1, we're now in season 2. He's released his second book. He's gotten engaged. So I'm looking forward to it, and we hope you guys are too.
Yeah. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you.